Hi guys, is journalist and public broadcaster Andrew Marr correct about the UK's departure from the European Union? In this clip from the New Statesman, he responds to comments in a book by Peter Foster where he describes what went wrong and what can be fixed when it comes to Brexit. Andrew claims that it would be a bad idea to have another referendum and try and re-enter the EU, but instead that the Labour Party should work to undo some of the worst of Brexit and build a better relationship with the European Union. While I agree with some of the things Andrew says here, I think he's leaving out Europe's take on all of this. Have a listen.
I did read a very good book by Peter Foster, who's the public policy editor of the Financial Times, about what went wrong with Brexit and how we can fix it. And he makes a very, very powerful, granular description of the way that small and medium-sized enterprises, so-called SMEs, are struggling to export to the EU and are deciding increasingly not to. There is a small but very visible and growing crisis in exporting British industry. And it's not just the manufacturing companies or the food producers or the farmers or the fishermen. It is also, of course, the service providers, the engineers, the accountants and all those kind of people. There is a contraction going on the whole time, which is incredibly damaging for Britain and is going to have to be reversed. My conclusion is that we cannot go back through another Brexit referendum and try to enter the EU, even if they'd have us, which they probably now would not. But that we have to start to open up much freer trading. The Labour Party in the past has talked about a series of kind of dynamic sectoral deals. So you agree with the EU that you are going to follow or map their regulation changes on some form of chemicals or whatever, and you get freer trade in result. And you have lots of those sectoral deals, and over time it starts to feel a little bit as if we have gone back into the single market without saying so. Now that means, and this is the hard conclusion that I come to, that we are going to have to become a country of rule takers when it comes to trade. I think this is very unfortunate. Obviously, it would be much better to be inside the EU and have a vote and have a say, but that's not on offer. So we are going to be rule takers. And in my view, it's only a matter of time as to how long the penny drops about that.
I completely agree. It's just a matter of time for the penny to drop and people realise, well, we're rule takers. Well, we should be actually rule makers. We should be back in the European Union, writing the rules like we were before. And writing rules that benefit Britain, because being a rule taker, well, has very little benefit to Britain. Yes, it will allow the UK to trade a bit better as a third country, but you know, if you're in the club writing the rules, you can write those rules to better suit UK trade, UK businesses. But the problem here, I don't think is so much the public, it's the politicians. The political parties are still resistant to the idea of rejoining the European Union. Now, Andrew at the beginning mentioned about how he'd be against the idea of having another referendum, probably because it would be extremely toxic. Now, I was against the idea of a referendum in the first place because I thought it should have been something decided by Parliament. Political parties say, we're going to leave the European Union, that's part of our manifesto, and then they would have a vote in Parliament over it. This is the job of politicians. They're paid massive salaries to understand, although many of them don't, but understand the ins and outs of the European Union. They were the ones who should have made the decision, not the public. The public had no understanding of the European Union. They had no understanding of what the consequences of Brexit would be. But they were expected to understand that and vote accordingly. That's why they were open to people like, that's why people like Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson were able to fill people's minds with lies and get away with it. So maybe another referendum isn't the way to go, but I think if you started with a referendum to leave, it may be necessary to have a referendum to rejoin or join, as the case may be. But it requires consensus in politics. So you'll have to have both the Labour Party and the Conservatives on the same hymn sheet saying we need to rejoin the European Union. Because as I pointed out at the beginning, the European Union is sort of left out of this discussion. Andrew mentioned that, yeah, they may not have us back. But the problem in the European Union is that they have their own issues to deal with. And the last thing they need is the UK knocking on the door saying we'd like to rejoin. Many politicians in Europe would like to have Britain part of the European Union again, but there are many issues. There are other countries joining at the moment. There are the complexities of those as well. And a lot of issues have to be ironed out. Support, of course, in Britain for rejoining is increasing. And I think we're at a tipping point where the vast majority of people say Brexit was a mistake and we should rejoin. But that's not enough. You need the politicians on board. And unfortunately, it's going to take time. The UK has to present itself in a position where it can rejoin. It has to be openly supportive of the European Union. We can't have these Eurosceptics in charge. We can't have Eurosceptics having a strong voice in political parties, because that would scupper the chances of rejoining, I believe. The pain is going to have to continue for some time until politicians, and I keep coming back to the politicians. You can have marches, you can have polls, you can have everything, but if the people in charge, the politicians, are not supportive of the idea, enthusiastically supportive of the idea of rejoining, then it's not going to happen. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.